Hello everyone, you're listening to The Right Side of Gaming. Today we're going to be going over the lore behind where exactly in the Magic timelines Magic Legends falls, and the lore behind 6 characters that have been confirmed to be in the game. We're talking major characters from the history of Magic the Gathering. In a recent interview, senior writer for Magic Legends, Winter Molinix, I hope I pronounced that right, has confirmed that 6 major characters from the Magic the Gathering lore are going to make appearances in Magic Legends. This includes Ral Zarek, Nisha Ravine, Squee, Lira Donbringer, Josu Vest, and Danitha Capation. There's also going to be more that haven't been announced yet, as well as more that will come out in future updates. Now, to be clear, these are the actual characters. This isn't someone with the same name. This isn't some type of weird alternate timeline version of them. They've made it very clear that they've been working with Wizards of the Coast to make sure that their stories and how they're designing everything fits within the established lore. We're not going to dig too far back with these characters and some of the events that surround them, because they've already made it clear that the video game is going to take place after the mending of Dominaria. If you're not familiar with the Great Mending, Dominaria had been damaged from all these time rifts that had opened up, and the Planeswalker Jeska, who is honestly an entire story all on her own, sealed the rifts that had opened up, but as a result, there was this sort of chain reaction throughout the multiverse, and yeah, mana started flowing through Dominaria again and healed the world, but it also had this negative side effect on Planeswalkers. It weakened their sparks. Up until then, they were incredibly powerful. Planeswalkers were basically immortal. They had almost godlike abilities, but after the mending, they became much weaker. They're still very powerful, much more so than maybe your average person, but they're not immortal, and they're definitely not on the level of sort of these godlike beings that they were before. Their ability to planeswalk was also limited. Prior to this, it was possible to planeswalk and take other people with you. There was also all kinds of cool technology, one of which we'll actually discuss later, that could be used to travel from one plane to another. Unfortunately, that stopped working just because the side effect just completely changed how mana and sparks and planeswalkers work. But we might still get some technology for interplanar travel. There was a little bit in Hour of Devastation and past that with this sort of planar bridge, but we're not going to be getting into that because they've also made it very clear that the story takes place before the Hour of Devastation. Now, if you're not familiar with that, that's when Nicol Bolas, the Elder Dragon, this incredibly evil and powerful planeswalker, came back to Amonkhet, which is sort of their Egyptian-themed multiverse plane, to claim this giant army of zombies, and sort of led to them setting up this really big, massive Avengers Endgame style confrontation between a ton of good planeswalkers and Nicol Bolas and his evil army and some evil planeswalkers. Now, the first planeswalker we're going to discuss actually worked for Nicol Bolas for a while. His name is Ral Zarek. He is a red-blue planeswalker from the plane of Ravnica. That is sort of this plane with this giant city. Everyone is sort of divided into these different guilds. There's some guildless people, but the idea is you have a guild that represents each of the 2 color combinations of Magic. So the red-blue combination is called the Isit League, and they are the mad scientists of Ravnica. Now, Ral Zarek is a storm mage. He creates electrical storms, controls rain, that type of thing. And he eventually becomes the guildmaster for the Isit League. Although that's after the Hour of Devastation, so we're not quite there yet. At this point in time, at most, he's going to be one of their chief researchers, because this dude make some crazy inventions. That's kind of their thing. They make crazy stuff. At the time, it probably blows up in their face, but it's fun. It's entertaining. Now, Raul Zarek's claim to fame was his investigation that led to the discovery of this crazy maze in Ravnica. So what happened was there was this guild pact, this agreement between all the guilds about how to do things, how to share power, all of that. And the founder of the Senate made this maze just in case, for whatever reason, the guild pact was dissolved. So Raul is trying to investigate all these ancient codes, tracking down these ley lines, finding all these little secrets, trying to find what they all lead to, find this maze. He even runs into and winds up working with one of our major planeswalkers, Jace, during all of this. And basically they find this maze that have to have, everyone, one person from each guild, work together to complete it at the same time. And if they don't, then there's basically this magic that's just gonna wipe everybody out. And during this process, Jace actually becomes the new guild pact because he sort of acted as a mediator, and that was kind of the big thing for the guild pact. So he becomes this living guild pact, this living mediation between all the guilds of Ravnica. And Raul Zarek was a part of that. Speaking of our major planeswalkers, our next major character that has been confirmed is one that is both a major planeswalker and has also worked with Jace on a few things, and that is Nisha Ravine. She is a green elven planeswalker, although sometimes she has a little green-blue or a little green-black in her. I think she's had a single green-blue card that released originally in Amonkhet, which was right before our Hour of Devastation, as well as a single green-black card from the most recent Zendikar set. But for the most part, she's depicted as a mono-green planeswalker. Her story has been changed a little bit over the years, but the important bits are she originally wasn't the most tolerant of people. She was definitely pro-elf and definitely anti-vampire, which is understandable because they live in a world where vampires will suck your blood and all that. But she's also very pro-Zendikar. She doesn't really care about the other planes, or at least at the beginning, she didn't care about the other planes. All she cared about was Zendikar, and we'll see how that comes into play. To understand the big deal behind Nissa, you need to understand the Eldrazi. They're these big, powerful, colorless creatures from the Blind Eternities. Think of that as like the Magic the Gathering version of outer space or something, okay? The Blind Eternities exist between the planes. So you planeswalk from one plane to another plane. It's like you go through the Blind Eternities. I'm sure there's a comparison to like Nightcrawler or something, but I really should have read more X-Men growing up because I don't know that one exactly. But that's kind of what you can picture. I think they've shown that in like cartoons and stuff. It's like, oh, we're going to slow down his teleport. And you can see him actually traveling through, sort of another dimension when he goes from one place to another. That's like the Blind Eternity comparison, okay? And the Eldrazi are basically these evil, ancient, Lovecraftian horror monsters. So, the big one, Emrakul, would basically be Cthulhu. So I want you to get that in your mind so you understand when I say that Nisha Ravine basically released Cthulhu. The major Eldrazi had been trapped on Zendikar in this Eye of Ugin, which, if you don't know, Ugin is a colorless planeswalker that is the twin brother of Nicol Bolas. Nice how a lot of that stuff sort of just connects the dots. And they were trapped by Ugin and a couple of other planeswalkers, Sorin, Markov, and Nahiri. And Nisha Ravine actually releases the Eldrazi. she was thinking, okay, well, if I release them, they'll just go somewhere else, and Zendikar will be safe from the Eldrazi. Because right now, Plane's kind of upset. Now, she is an animist, so she, does a lot of power with the Earth and the plane itself. So she feels when Zendikar is angry or upset, and she just wants to get these beings, off of her plane. Naturally, it doesn't work out quite like she planned. She releases them, and they wreak havoc on Zendikar. Now she runs into some of our other major planeswalkers, specifically Jace, Gideon, and Chandra, and they form the Gatewatch. That is the Magic the Gathering version of the Justice League or the Avengers. You have your superhero characters forming a superhero team to stop evil in the world, or in this case, in the multiverse. So they form this Gatewatch, and they all take this oath. Each one of them takes their own oath to sort of stand together and, in this case, fight the Eldrazi. They managed to defeat two of them, Ulamog and Kozilek. But the best they can do with the third one is track it to Innistrad, which, if you'll remember, is another one of our Planes and Magic legends. And it's on Innistrad that the best they can manage to do is just sort of trap Emrakul in the moon of Innistrad. Now, the fact that Nisha Ravine wouldn't help them does show some character growth. She starts caring about all the planes, not just Zendikar, especially because she realized what horrible fate that she has unleashed upon everybody. But she does sort of leave the Gatewatch for a while because she believed that one of the other planeswalkers, Liliana, was becoming a threat. Because after this hour of devastation, they wind up on Dominaria, and we'll see how that plays in because some of that is going to come back into play with some of our other characters. They wind up on Dominaria, and she's just really worried because that's where Liliana wanted to be for one of her things. No spoilers just yet. And she's like, okay, this woman is evil. She's getting too powerful. I'm out. Now, speaking of Dominaria, that's where our next four characters come into play. First, we have Squee, the Goblin. He is red, mono red, and he's a goblin. And he worked on the Skyship Weatherlight. So Skyship is just like what you think it is, Skyship, Airship. If you've played like Final Fantasy type games, you've got it. And the Weatherlight was one of those ships that could travel between the planes. Okay? Naturally, that stopped working after the Great Mending because that's some of that interplanar travel that we were talking about. But he was a part of the crew, and he was loyal. I mean, this isn't like your evil, backstabbing goblin. He was a good crewman. So during this invasion by the Phyrexians, which are just horrible, evil creatures that want to taint everyone and turn them into metal or something, he was captured, and he was made immortal so that they could repeatedly kill him. So they'd, just kill him all they wanted, and he would just live through it. Unfortunately, it kind of backfired on them. He got to kill one of his captors, and now he's the oldest goblin on all of Dominaria. Now, when he was on the Weatherlight, Squee served under Commander Gerard Capation. Naturally, when the ship was repaired and they were trying to get crew, they decided they wanted another Capation. So we have Rathwin Capation, who is the ship's mage, but they've only got him because his sister, Danitha Capation, didn't want the job, and she's actually our next major character. So Danitha Capation is a distant relative of Gerard's, and she is a knight. Her father is the head of this major household on Benalia. And she didn't want to join the Weatherlight crew because she felt her duty was to defend against the Cabal. So Raph, volunteered instead. And the Cabal is this evil organization of wizards and clerics on Dominaria that worshipped money and profit. And their god turned out to be this character Kuber, who, again, is a story all in itself, but it's actually related to that Jessica person we talked about before. But he was later replaced by Belzenok, a very powerful demon. We can actually tie that back to Nissa and Liliana, because Nissa, when she left, it was because they were on Dominaria, which just happened to be where Liliana, wanted to be, because she has to slay these demons that she has made contracts with, and one of them was Belzenok. That actually leads us to one of our next characters, Josu Vest. Now, Josu is the brother of Liliana Vest, who had been poisoned by his father's enemies. So Liliana decides she wants to go out and get the cure for him, but it required this tree root, and their father's enemies had completely burned down the grove where the tree grew. So she was helped by this mysterious raven man that I don't think to this day we know exactly what's up with him. But he told her, it's like, hey, I've got this cure, and it'll cure Josu, but your family's not going to want you to do it. So naturally, Liliana just completely ignored her family's warnings and gave Josu the cure. So it cured him, but then it drove him insane and also poisoned him all over again. So Liliana turned Josu's victims into zombies to fight him, and that ignited her spark, because clearly that's a pretty horrible thing to have to live through. And the Cabal later recruited Josu and turned him into a lich in the service of, wait for it, Belzenok. See, it all just sort of connects back together. Now, after the Hour of Devastation, Liliana manages to break the lich spell and kill Josu. And before he dies, he's like, oh, yeah, our family's wiped out because of you, and it's all your fault. You're the real curse. But this is just, at the very least, just before all that. So Josu is still alive, and he is most likely going to be some type of evil lich. Finally, our last major character is Lira Donbringer. And to understand her, we have to go back to Rhea Donbringer. Rhea was one of the angels created by the Planewalker Sarah, which honestly gets back into some of that Jessica Kuber storyline. But I don't think we necessarily need to know that. That was a while back. But Rhea was one of the defenders of Benalia, and she died during that Phyrexian invasion. So Lira took over for Rhea and founded the Order of Dawn, an organization that she named after Rhea Donbringer. The Order of Dawn is part of the Church of Sarah, and it protects Benalia. And there's other parts of the church. We've seen them talk in their live streams and things about cultist attacks on Dominaria and things like that. So you can kind of see how Lira Donbringer and the Cabal might sort of work into things. Now, if we're trying to figure out where exactly in the Magic timeline all of this is taking place, we know that Zendikar is going to be full of the Hedrons that were used to bind the Eldrazi, and they were still there after the Eldrazi were released. So the original Zendikar sets came out. Zendikar was in 2009, World Awake was 2010, and Rise of the Eldrazi was 2010. Then later on, once the Eldrazi were released, we came back, and that was Battle for Zendikar in 2015 and Oath of the Gatewatch in 2016. Finally, the Hour of Devastation was 2017. So we have at least a somewhat narrow portion to look at. We know that it takes place probably somewhere between our 2009 lore and our 2017. Depending on the state of Zendikar, it might actually be something closer to between the Battle of Zendikar and Oath of the Gatewatch and Hour of Devastation. which might make sense depending on when exactly they started doing all the story writing for all of this. I'm really interested to see just to what extent the Eldrazi show up, because that might give us a little bit better indication of where exactly in the timeline we are. That's also why I didn't go into a lot of the stuff involving Kuber and Jessica and all that, because that was all pre-Zendikar, so I don't think it's necessarily going to come up that much, but it might. And I can always go back and we can revisit that later. For now, I think we at least have sort of a lore window that we can be looking at. But that's all for today. Thanks so much for listening. If you'd like to leave a comment, subscribe, leave a like, that would be great. If you don't, that's okay too. Either way, I hope you have an awesome day, and I will catch you next time.